turn the machine off before you start this. This is the same on 1600s, 2600s, and 3600s. Examine the first rail here to make sure none of the Starwheels have been pulled out. Okay, they're all good in this one. To remove it, it's 2 screws, that one there and one there. Just take those out, lift the rail out carefully, replace the Starwheels, inspect underneath for Starwheels or springs, clean those out if necessary, or any paper fragments. Reinstall it. Be sure to never try to lift up on the rail. If you do, it'll raise up, but it'll lock in position, and when you turn the machine on, the carriage will come across and catch, and you'll have to get into service mode, and I forget the process, it's been a while. Get into service mode to make it lower back down. So just make sure you don't lift up on it without taking the screws out. To pull this rail out, first thing you'll want to do is loosen the belt for the cutter, which, the cutter moves back and forth. It's a good idea to check the cutter at this point first to make sure it goes across smoothly, because if it doesn't, it's possible that it could have caught one of those Starwheels in the blade and damaged the blade, and then you'll have to replace the cutter. To remove the cutter, take the motor. If you notice, you can slide it back and forth. It's on spring. It'll go back and forth about a ½ inch. Maybe not quite a ½ inch. But it'll go back and forth enough to where you'll be able to pull it off that wheel across over there. Okay, the belt's off the left wheel. And now it's off the right wheel. Oh, and also we're going to remove this to get it out of the way. Makes it easier. To remove that cover, you got one of those big HP screws there and here. So just take those two out. Don't drop them and lose them down in there. It's easy to do. Now with that top plastic cover removed, you just got more room to maneuver when you're pulling out the assembly there. Okay, let me see if I can get my camera to focus. Get it to focus. Okay, for some reason I didn't have autofocus turned on. Okay, you gotta get the tubes out of your way, and they're all held in. It's hard to do this and hold the camera and film at the same time. Take your little tool, just loosen those. There's 5 of them across there, so do that. All right, they're all loose. Before we pull this out, I want you to look, see where the ink tubes are positioned? They're in front, well, they're kind of just laying right there in front of the metal housing part of this we're going to pull out. When you put it back in, they tend to want to go behind it. And so you'll have to use a hook tool or something to raise them and pull them out. And we'll go over that on reassembly. Next, you got to take out the 2 screws holding the assembly in, and they're H10 torque screws, one there, and obviously right down there. When you take them out, it's good to have a magnetic type screwdriver, or one of these tools like I have, because the washer will tend to fall off down in there, and that's not good. Okay, both of those screws are out, one on that side, one on the other. Now while we're at this point, go ahead and notice again the cutter blade will, because when you put it back together, the cutter blade wants to kind of crimp itself or just set itself on top of the cutter instead of behind the cutter. You got the cutter blade that's in the unit against this cutter blade, and see where the pin is right here. We'll look at that again here in a second. Like, I'll show you. If I start to raise it up, you'll see it pops out. And so like if you're going to try to, when you put it back in, it'll fit back in position, and you think, okay, I got it, and you tighten it down, and then that's stuck. It's tight, wedged against this. So before you reinstall it, it's best to kind of push in on the pin at the same time when you're getting it positioned, and then it's right. So you push in the pin and make sure that fits in its position. And if you tighten it up, just be sure to check it once you tighten the 2 screws. If it's tight, it means it's still pinched somehow. Loosen your screws, move it around, push it in until it snaps behind it. Tighten it up again, see if you can pull it. It might take a couple of tries, as it did on me the first time I did it. But after a couple of attempts, you'll see kind of the sweet spot where it fits, and as long as you can pull it back and forth easily with a belt, then you know you're fine. All right, the next step is to pull this entire unit out, and it's kind of, I'll move it around where you can see what we're talking about, how big of a unit it is. It's up behind this, but with 2 hands, one on each side, you can lift it and twist it and work it out from behind the hoses and behind this, and it'll come out pretty easily. I can't remember for sure, but I think in the manual it tells you to pull all this stuff out, but it's not necessary. Okay, here it is again. I just got it pulled out. I pulled it from behind the plastic area. It's no big deal. And it's just laying here for a second. So I'm going to pause it again and pull it completely out. And as you do pull it out, just take your time to slide it gently under the tubes without snagging anything else. It'll be good. All right, here we go with it pulled out and upside down. I just got it laid up here. And you can see what I'm talking about. This Starwheel section and this one has been yanked out from the carriage, getting caught on paper and going across, and then just ripping out those Starwheels. And while you're at it, look all the way across. Sometimes there'll be another set pulled out. Just take your time, just fully examine each one. I mean, you can even just make sure that each one's in place. All the way across, let's see. And this one, yeah, this one is typically is only missing those first 2. And what I have here is a section that I've taken out of, I think it was a T2600 from our boneyard. And you see I'm down to 2. I've got to find some more or order some more. And I'll have to see if I can get a part number and put in the video description. But it's just, I mean, this part might be different. Heck, it might even be the same. No, it looks like it's different. But the Starwheels themselves are the same. And you can just, the way you do it is, it's hard to do it. Okay, you grab the Starwheels and pull up on them, and the springs come out. See how it just comes right out? Just like that. And there's your little assembly that you put back in the place that are missing. Okay, I've got them laid there. I'm just going to show you. You just take your finger and see if I can do it. looking through the camera lens. And the snap went in down. Snap the other end down, so that one's in. Same way with this one. Snap one in, snap the other. So there's, and you think, okay, there's one missing here, but it's not. It's just that that's like, say if it was, these are in sections. If this was this section over here, it would be attached where it goes from one to the other. This is all the paper path needs right here. So, you know, don't think you're missing a weird one here. It's just, it doesn't have one there. And if you're feeding paper that's a little curly or possibly a little damaged on the ends, and without these edge ones here, that's right where the carriage unit's first coming and the cutter blade. And so it's real important to maintain these and keep them in the machine, or else the roller wheels will have a hard time keeping the paper where it needs to be. And you'll have nothing but jams and lots of trouble. Now at this point you want to take your light and just search all the way across to see where, if possible, if you can find the old star wheels or springs, because you want to get them out. You don't want to leave them in there, because if they're down inside one of these little cubbies or like leaning up against something, they'll cause paper to jam too. And that's why it's important to take this thing out to where you can make sure there's no pieces of springs or star wheels or even bits of paper stuck in there. I'm not seeing anything right now, but I'll look close again when I pause it and then show it if I see something. And I couldn't find any star wheels or springs, which is typical. I hardly ever see them. Sometimes they'll be under the machine or in the back basket, but more than likely they've fallen out and gotten swept up or something. But a lot of times they will be down in here, and sometimes you can't even see them, so you take your air blower blow all the way across, because if there's any hidden down in there, they'll pop up, and then you'll have to tweeze them out if they don't fly out by themselves. Okay, next I slowly and carefully guided the assembly back under the belt and got it into place, and then I'll have to pause it, of course, and then work it up in there. Okay, after a little wiggling, I got it to line up. See, it's got the little keyed spot, and of course a place for the screw. This side's no problem, and then you got to work it gently up under and around that. And that's what I was talking about with the, sorry about the camera, it's going to be on. See how the hoses start to get up, and at that point they're behind it. That's where you got to kind of get something in there, and a hook tool is great for getting them pulled up and back in front where they're, you want them down inside this trough area where the little pegs can stick back in there. So do that, make sure you get that before you tighten anything down. Okay, I've got the hoses back where they're supposed to be. I don't have the white thing stuck back in yet. But the next thing we want to do is make sure that the blade is in right. And see, right now you can tell it's not because that pin is sticking out. So if you tighten it up now, it would be jammed. So now I'll do like I was saying, I'll manipulate that till I get it just right. Okay, I got both my screws in. And just remember, when you pull them out, they weren't very tight, so don't go crazy tightening them or else you'll strip it and probably be putting a lot more parts in it. All right, so now we'll test, see if I got mine. Mine looks right because the button's pushed in, so it should be fine. Yeah, and see it. You want to pull it all the way across just to make sure it doesn't bind anywhere. Don't accidentally get the belt underneath when you're pulling it. Okay, so it works. If you didn't have it right, you wouldn't be able to pull it, or else it would be really hard to pull. So it needs to pull fairly smooth. And if it doesn't, loosen your screws, reseat it, tighten them back down gently, try it again until you get it just perfect. And then I like to go ahead and get the belt properly put back on. And since I got the light over here, I can show you a little bit better on this, how this motor is spring done. So what I like to do, slide this back a little bit, is get my belt Sorry about that. Get my belt something like that, and with the other hand pull on that and get it around it, and then I'll pause it and do that, and then we'll do the other side. All right, the belt's on that pulley proper, and then I've got it like this in this hand, and you can see where the other pulley is, but you're going to have to reach over and grab the motor and pull it to center it, or to get enough slack to get it around that pulley. Okay, the belt's back around the guide pulley. And it's actually pretty easy to do. It's no big deal. You just want to make sure it's on the pulley proper. And the best way to check is once it's on, grab it and move it back and forth. And I like to let it be in the original position that it was when I started it, whether it's on that side or the other, or when I shut it down. Yeah, then you can go ahead and snap these back on, and I like to use this tool to get them in the little... Yeah, did it without having to put the camera down. Grab that one, snap it. Okay, and then you got to do the other two. The last one might be a little tricky, but it's no big deal. All right, they're all put back in place. And if you did move it around, just make sure your hoses are still where they're supposed to be instead of behind that back lip. And then you can put the top plastic cover on, and we'll go from there. Sometimes you got to fight sticking the cover on. Usually it's right in the middle here. These little plastic tabs have to line up down in those little index spots. But if you get it right, it'll drop right in where it's supposed to be. All right, and I like to use this little tool that I have. Just stick that in there, trick the switch so it thinks the door's closed, so you can watch what it does. And start it up. And with it tricked open, you can see its full operation. Check over there, make sure there's no paper stuck down in there. Just look at the operation of the service station. Alright, and it started feeding before I could start filming again, but it fed up fine, as it should. Alright, and I set a test print of just the meters to see how it feeds and prints. Good to have it open when you're doing it, because if there's something still blocking it back there, it's going to start bubbling up right there in that back area, and that's where it'll jam. Or your knife will jam it if the print head doesn't jam it. If you got it on there right, it should be fine. Alright, there's a couple other things to check too. For one thing, make sure that your setup shop guys put these in right. Where this is behind it, they tend to sometimes want to put this part on top of this, and then these are really tight because it's supposed to be easy to pull back and forth. Anyway, sometimes these will be out of position, and sometimes just pushing will snap this back in. I had one today that I actually went to, and the jam was caused where this section had gotten dislodged, and it was kind of laying down in there sideways, causing the jam. And the best way to do it is to pull off some of these things, push this and pull out the top feed section where you got more room, and then you can see down in there. You can look at your other ones and see how they're snapped in there, and just do the same thing. Snap these back into place. But I always like to check each one of these, make sure they're nice and smooth, and sometimes you'll get one and you'll push on it, it'll snap back into place where it was either not set right from the factory or somebody messed with it. So that's on the front. Oh. And of course, I usually do this when I'm cleaning out the star wheels. I check back in there to see if I see any pieces of star wheels or anything. Sometimes these will be missing. A couple of those. Looks like there's one missing there. Maybe they just don't put them all on from the... Okay, one's missing there and there, so maybe they just omit a couple of them from the factory. Alright. Alright, we all know how these are a pain to clear jams. You have to open it up and cut the paper and then pull the paper. I always like to go over this with the customers too, and it doesn't say it on the screen, but this little thin belt is right there in the area where the paper is usually jammed or torn, and it shows you to go in there with scissors and cut. It'd be very easy to accidentally cut across and cut a belt. And that's going to happen, so just if you go over that with your customers, maybe they'll be a lot more careful. And then also they might get in here and cut the encoder strip if they're really crazy. So just tell your customers to just really watch out for the encoder strip, and especially the belt back there. And for them, if they're pulling paper out, don't pull up on the paper where it lifts up on this and gets it in the lock position, because then you'll be out trying to figure that out. And the most important thing is to make sure the paper is perfect on the edges. And what I'm talking about, I'm sure y'all have all seen, where they get a brand new roll and it's been crunched somewhere on one of the edges from delivery or something. If it has, and it's all wrinkled and cut or crunched, and it doesn't have to be bad. Well, this paper's been in this machine so long, it's wrinkledy. They don't want to use any paper that has damaged or crushed edges, because that will definitely cause a jam, and then you'll have star wheels out. So if you can get them to check their paper every time when they're loading paper, if they will, then that'll save some problems right there. That's probably the initiation of all the problems, the bad paper.